Good morning and welcome, Gina. You specialize in helping businesses reduce employee turnover by improving leadership skills. This is very, very fascinating. And that's something that a lot of either small businesses or corporations, we all need that because our employees are the key to the success of the business. So I am very excited to hear more about your journey and also the work that you are doing.
Hi, it's great to be here. I'm so glad to have you on. I'm glad to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So can you tell us a bit more about your background and how you went from being an airline captain and flight instruction to founding Gina Longo Consulted?
Well, it's sort of a long circuitous route. It didn't happen right away. As you say, I was an airline pilot. I was an airline pilot in the United States for 10 years. Prior to that, obviously, I was in college. I have a master's degree. And after college, I was kind of like, well, what do I do now? And I actually became a pilot in sort of an odd way. Do you mind me kind of going into that? It's slightly
Please,
okay.
Go ahead.
I ride horses. So I was riding hunter jumpers and I was working on a horse farm and, shoveling and feeding and doing the usual things you do on a horse farm. And I always wanted a horse. And I was like, how am I ever going to afford a horse? I'm just working on a horse farm. And my dad, who was an airline pilot, he was also a military pilot, but he was an airline pilot at the time. He said, if you go be an airline pilot, you will be able to have enough money and enough time to get a horse. And I thought, great, sure, I'll try it. So I had actually been accepted to law school and I got accepted to flight school and I pretty much flipped a coin and I went to flight school. So that's actually how I got into flying was I wanted to get a horse, which I still haven't managed to do yet. One day I'll get a horse. But so I instructed I was a student for about a year and then I instructed for about a year and a half. And then I went to the airlines and I was at my airline for 10 years. And for 8 of those, I was a captain, flying both turboprops and jet. So I was a captain for 8 years. And I still was kind of like, this is not everything that I want to do. I know being a pilot sounds like a dream job, and it is a dream job for a lot of people. But what I really wanted was not only to own a horse, but to own a horse in England. I wanted to live in the UK because I love Britain and I've loved it for years and years. So I realized that staying a pilot was probably not going to get me to living in England, but I couldn't see how I was going to make that happen. How do you just pack up and go? And then one day I found a job opening for a simulator instructor, the big full motion simulators that pilots train in Farnborough, so just south of London. And I thought, why not? I knew they were able to hire American instructors, even though it was in the UK. And so I applied and I got the job and I packed up. It took 2 months from the time I got the job to the time I was living in England. So it's pretty much just like, Mom, Dad, I'm moving to the UK. Can you help me pack? And then I went over there and my dogs came over about a year later. And so I instructed for about 2 years, just under 2 years. And then that job ended, unfortunately, when, economy kind of crashed and a lot of people were losing their jobs. So I packed my 2 dogs. I had 2 German Shepherds who had come over from America. And because I couldn't afford to stay in my house without a job, because I lost my job, we actually my 2 German Shepherds and I spent 3 years living in a touring caravan and traveling the entire UK. So for 3 straight years, it was just my 2 German Shepherds and me traveling the UK from tip to toe. And then when that ended, I came back to this country and kind of just, bopped around for a while, trying one thing and another. And then I eventually stumbled on this sort of training thing because, as I said, I'd been an instructor, I'd been a captain, so I've got some leadership knowledge about how to be a leader in, sort of high stakes, high pressure situations. And a coach I was working with said, why don't you do leadership training? You've got the experience. And I went, okay, I'll give it a go. So that's kind of how I got there.
Wow, this is amazing. So you bet with your dad, become a pilot. Oh, by the way, when you get the horse, can you please let me know so I can go for a ride?
Yeah, and will do.
And all that dream you actually wanted to go to UK actually did happen. You make that happen. And that actually linked you to starting your own business.
Yeah. When I came back into this country, it was either that or I don't know what else I was going to do. So I was like, well, like she said, I had this leadership experience. I do have that knowledge. I do have that experience because, being an airline captain is, you get yourself into some interesting situations or you're put in interesting situations sometime where you do have to know what you're doing as a leader. And so I thought, well, I do have this experience and let's just see where it can go.
But how has been the journey of you saying that I'm going to be a leadership coach? How's that been for you so far?
Well, this is maybe a fine point, but I'm actually a leadership development trainer. So
Trainer,
I like
yes.
to, yeah, so not a coach so much. I like to focus more on specializing with corporations, although I'm very happy to work with individuals, because what I have found is that, and it seems to be women mostly, and I'm not quite sure why, but a lot of times women are put into a box, or they're told, you can do this, you can't do that, don't try this. And in fact, my sort of 6-month mentorship program, which is geared toward individuals, I actually developed that based on 3 women that I met while I was traveling. Remember, I said I traveled for 3 years by myself with just my dogs. And these 3 women really made an impact on me. They probably wouldn't remember meeting me, but I remember them. And I thought, there have to be more women like them that I can help. And the one woman, do you mind me telling you about them?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the one woman I met, I was out walking my 2 German Shepherds, and we're just walking around a park. This is over in London. And she was a dog walker. She had, 4 or 5 dogs that she was walking. And she was kind of talking to me about, she wasn't really happy with what she was doing. And I said, well, why don't you just start your own business? And she looked at me and she's like, I can't start my own business. And I said, well, why not? And she said, well, because people would think I'm trying to get above my station. She actually said that. And I went, okay,
Wow.
literally never heard that in this day and age, but fair enough. I said, oh, don't worry about them. Go start it if you want to. I don't know what she ended up doing, but that stuck with me. And a second woman who stuck with me, I met actually at one of the caravan sites where we were staying, my dogs and I, and she said, how do you do this by yourself? And I said, well, it's fine. I just go travel around, tow the car, tow the caravan behind the car, whatever. She said, I could never do that. I said, yeah, of course you can. She said, no, I could never do that. You can only do that because you're American. I was like, what?
What?
Yeah. Apparently American women are, more able or more willing or maybe more encouraged, possibly more encouraged to go out and be on their own and be independent. But that stuck with me. I thought, that can't be right. That can't be right. And then the third woman who really stuck with me, I was putting petrol, gas in my car, something you do without even thinking about, dogs in the back seat. And there's a woman on the other side of the pump. She was probably in her, I want to say late 70s, maybe. And she waited until I was finished. And then she asked me if I could come over and help her. And it turned out that she was a recent widow. And in her whole life, she never had to put petrol in her car. She didn't know how to use the pump. She didn't know how to get the gas, the flap open on her car. She didn't know how to use a credit card. And I thought, wow, how many women are out there who have spent, whether intentionally or not, spent their whole lives relying on someone else. And then when they aren't able to rely on that person anymore for whatever reason, they don't know how to do that. And so actually it was those 3 women who sort of inspired me to develop the 6-month mentorship program, the Confident Leadership System, to help women. Like I said, it's usually women, to sort of get that confidence and get that independent spirit and be able to go out and do things alone. Yeah. So that's actually just a piece of what I do.
There's actually some really great examples and you brought some great points as well. We always think as women, there's a limit. Our limit is the kitchen. Our limit is the house. Our limit is the backyard. It's like we limit ourselves so much in so many different things and for no reason. Yep. And one thing that I realize as women, leadership is something we already have within us, because leading a household isn't that easy. People might think it is, but it's not.
Exactly.
It's a lot of work. So I like how you get inspired by it, and also the advice that you give to this woman. I'm pretty sure you changed their lives somehow, make it different in them, because they get to see you. It's like, wait, she can do that? Perhaps I can too. I can give it a shot myself.
I hope so. Like I said, I don't know whatever happened to any of those 3 women, but I hope that one lady started her own business, and I hope that other woman she didn't know how to drive, first of all. The second one, and I was like, wow, I didn't know how to drive. I hope she learned how to drive, and I hope she decided to travel on her own or do something, even if it's just go to the movies on your own, because there are some people who won't even do that. They didn't even go to a movie on their own or a film. And then at least I know that I helped the third woman, the woman in her 70s, because by the time I pulled away from the pump, she knew how to use the pump. So that I can feel good about. She learned how to do that.
Yes, she learns how to do something for that day. So now, with your experience as a cool resource management instructor, how do you think the skills you learn in the aviation industry can be applied to leadership in the corporate world?
Oh, it absolutely carries over. Crew resource management is the system that pilots, and now they're taking it into other parts of the flight crew, the flight attendants, dispatchers, mechanics. It's a system that pilots use to communicate with each other to ensure safe flight. And it actually started back in the early 80s, because in the late 70s, early 80s, airplanes, perfectly good airplanes, were falling out of the sky at an alarming rate. And the airlines started looking into this and going, why are these perfectly good, because it weren't mechanical problems, airplanes crashing? And it was because of the lack of communication on the flight deck. And a lot of that had to do with the power structure that was going on at that time. So the captain, and it was almost always a man, the captain was king and God, and you didn't question the captain. So even though in a lot of these instances, the first officer or maybe the second officer saw what a potential problem was happening, they didn't know how to speak up. They didn't want to speak up. Maybe they felt afraid to speak up. And if they did speak up, the captain might shoot them down, yes. Might say, you don't know what you're talking about. So these planes crashed, and the airlines obviously got a little concerned about this. And so they implemented this new program, which is mandated now by the FAA. It's called Crew Resource Management. And it encompasses all these skills that are absolutely, crucial as well to business, communication, how you feedback, different things like that, because that was one of the problems that they were finding is the crews would try to talk and the captain would shut them down. End result, crashed airplane. So you got communication, decision-making skills. Oh gosh, I've got a whole book over there. I should pull it out. But there's a whole bunch of skills that are involved in crew resource management that translate directly to the business world. So I'd love to be able to put that in it.
Is the class also for the flight attendants, the pilots, all of them, or is it just the pilots themselves?
It used to be when it first started, as I said, back in like the early 80s, it was initially in the airlines, it was initially only the pilots. But now the airlines have realized, and this happened a while back, the airlines have realized that the cockpit crew does not act in isolation. They are part of a bigger system. The flight attendants in the back, they might spot something going on in the back, smell something or smoke in the cabin or whatever that the pilots don't know anything about. So they have to be integrated into the training, and that's what they're starting to do. And they're also, the airlines being they, are also realizing that the dispatchers are part of the crew, the schedulers are part of the crew, the maintenance people are part of the crew, the ground staff is part of the crew, so wow. Everybody's kind of involved in this. So even though the pilots are the ones up in the pointy end making essentially, the final decision, they have the final word, but part of that is taking in input from all of these other sources. Every available resource is what we like to say in crew resource management. Use information from every available resource, whether it's on the ground or in the air, to make the best decisions to make the flight safe. And that kind of overarching use of all the resources, whether in the air, on the ground, in the manuals, in your training, directly translates to how businesses can operate more efficiently and effectively as well.
I love how you're explaining it, because that makes sense. It does apply to any type of business, really, because a lot of time you think about customer service only gonna handle this customer, but really the customer start with sales. So really the conversation starts some point, even before even hit sales. It start with your website somehow. So it's all connected to one another. And if you know the source of where it started, it will be a lot easier to know how to deal with that client.
Absolutely. Yeah. In business corporations, and no matter how small your business is, you're not working, even if you're sitting at home in your home office working behind your computer, I guess in front of your computer, working in front of your computer, you're still not working in isolation. You've got your maybe a virtual assistant. You've got the suppliers who sell you whatever it is you might be using. You've got your team as well, even if they're not directly working right with you. So in that sense, I like to say that, like you said, you already said it, everybody is a leader in one way or another. Even if you're just a solo entrepreneur working by yourself, you have to lead the team of people that support you in whatever it is you're doing.
But now let's talk about the company itself. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us about Gina Longo Consultant and the services it offers?
Yeah, well, it's, as I said, it's sort of in two pieces. So I've got that individual 6 month it's basically 6 months, 6 month mentorship, which is the Confident Leadership System. And the rest of what I do is geared toward businesses and corporations. So that's more the leadership side, although leadership does come into play because I'm trying to help people who are individuals become good leaders or, kind of come out of their shells and be more independent so that they can then exert their leadership skills. The rest of it is geared toward businesses and corporations to help them through more the entire leadership development cycle. So from hiring to creating managers as better coaches to, just all sorts of different things that go through the entire cycle of how you go from new hire to leader. And that's kind of, it's more of the entire training system rather than just an individual thing. Although there are some people who, as part of the leadership development training system, might need to sort of break out and do sort of more individualized training, if that makes sense.
So do you do it pretty much just like in a group? Is that what it is?
For the corporate thing, yeah, it would be more of a group thing. It can be either live or because everything's virtual now, right? So live or virtual.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So I do like to limit the class size because it has to be very interactive. I'm more of a facilitator than a trainer when I would do these corporate training courses. So I like to keep it to about 12 to 15 people, especially virtually, because people get lost. And I'm sure you've seen this, if you've got hundreds of people or dozens of people, you've got the people who, like me, believe it or not, I'm an incredible introvert. And that's a whole nother story about the introversion thing. So who just sit there and they might be learning. They're learning a lot, they're taking it in, but they're not actually actively participating, possibly, right? Because they're sort of lost in the crowd. And that happens in a classroom as well. I'm sure you've seen it. That if you've got too big of a group of people, there are some people who sort of get lost in the crowd. So I like to keep the course size or the class size, if you will, workshop size a little smaller so that everybody has a chance to participate. Because sometimes it's intimidating to speak up if you are not naturally outgoing. And I know this from very personal experience. I've had to learn to be able to do this. This doesn't come natural. This speaking to a lot of people. Yeah. This didn't come naturally. I had to work at it.
I think we all had to work on it at some point of time in our life. Yeah. So now, do you provide the services worldwide, anywhere in the world, or is it just in the United States?
Oh, no. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine. I am such a night owl that I'm like, I should be working with people in Australia because the time that they're up is the time that I'm actually at my best. So yeah. So no, pretty much anywhere in the world, anybody who needs leadership development, it's like I said, it's an end-to-end talent management system. That's actually what it is. It's a talent management system. And anybody who needs that, who's got employees or looking to get employees, and like you said earlier, turnover is a big thing. So one of the things that people are seeing now, that companies are seeing now, is you've got a lot of young, very inexperienced people being put into management positions who've had no leadership training at all, no management training, so they don't know how to give feedback. They don't know how to hold useful sort of one-on-one situations. They don't know how to handle any difficult conversations they might have to handle. So especially with all this turnover, you've got new people being put into management positions who are like, whoa, okay, great. Thanks for the raise, but I don't know what I'm doing. So that's where the talent management system comes into play.
Wow. So pretty much you come in and for how long do you stay?
That really depends on, it's bespoke, right? So it's all depending on what the actual business or company needs. Okay. So I've got sort of the cycle. Okay. Like I said, it starts from hiring talent to finding out your goals to coaching, teaching the managers, teaching the leaders how to actually be coaches to their team, because that's also a big thing. And then developing relationships, it's a whole series of things. And within those kind of 8 topics, it's basically 8 core universal topics. I slot in the crew resource management stuff, which is sort of more specific, like absolute communication skills. One of my favorite things sharing is culture. Because people in different cultures communicate differently. Americans communicate differently than the French, communicate differently than the English, communicate differently than Germans. And because everything is so globalized and worldwide now, one of the things that I find fascinating and I love to talk about is how to communicate differently between cultures because, feedback, Americans give feedback and receive feedback differently than the French give feedback and receive feedback. So if you've got like an American boss giving feedback to a French employee, the American boss might be thinking he or she is saying one thing and the French person's thinking or hearing a completely different thing. And so they might, not be on the same page. So kind of going through those cultural differences is a whole nother level to communicating well as a manager and as a leader.
So what advice would you give to leaders to be able to understand this type of communication skills?
There are a lot of courses, there are a lot of books. I just showed you one there. It's called The Culture Map, which I'm actually just getting through. I haven't read it yet, but there are a lot of courses, a lot of information out there that you can find out. Like if you're going to have an employee from a specific place. Now, again, you can't make generalizations. Obviously, everybody's different, but you can sort of get a general overall view as to what somebody could potentially be like by sort of studying their culture and studying how they communicate, how they talk. And a lot of it comes down to not so much what you say, because a lot of culture, okay, so like, just for example, Americans, Germans, Danish, Dutch, they're very more straightforward. They're very more, what you see is what you get. What you say is what we're actually saying. And then there are some cultures that it's much more internal, and you have to read their eyes and you have to read their body language, and you have to read what they're not saying rather than what they are saying. So if you're going to have the advice I would give in this case is, if you have an employee who is from a different culture, read up on just to get a general overview on what they might be thinking when you're talking to them, how they might be reacting, how you can read their body language or their eyes or their mouth. Does that make sense?
Yes. But when you talk about body language, the way you act, even the face, sometimes I see it's changed. So as they're talking, it's kind of like, yeah, you're not telling me something here. So now, is that something that you also provide during the class so they can understand different type of body language, different type of things that might happen that can be a signal for them to know, hey, this employee is not happy here?
But it's interesting you said that. I actually did the answer to that in short is, yes, sort of, because I don't pretend to be a body language expert. Okay.
Yes.
There are people who know this way more than I do. But one thing that I did do not too long ago, I did a workshop where I showed pictures. Now I love my dogs. I had German Shepherds. They're unfortunately gone now. I told you I traveled with them. Aww. And in this workshop, what I did was show pictures of my German Shepherds with varying body language and varying expressions on their face. And I said, okay, what do you think this dog is saying? What do you think she's saying in this picture? And they actually got it right. And then I said, okay, so like say that he was nervous, he was scared, he was whatever. And I said, what would that look like in a human? And then I got them to tell me what, so I used the dogs as an example, because who doesn't want to look at beautiful German Shepherds, right? And yes. And I said, okay, so what this dog is feeling is this, this, this. And they would go and they get it right. The dog is feeling this, this, this. And so, okay, now you're working with a human. What would those feelings or those emotions look like in a human? How would they manifest in a human being? And that was so much fun. We had a really good time with that. And I sort of had an underlying purpose to that, which was also to help people realize what the dogs are saying, because I also have a lot of experience training dogs, training my German Shepherds, and body language is huge for dogs. So that's sort of one of my other things that I'm passionate about, is helping people be able to read dogs better. So I kind of had a dual purpose with that workshop.
But that was a great technique you used in the workshop.
Yeah, it was fun. We had a good time.
Yes, because a dog, sometimes it takes a little bit like, okay, sad, happy, smiling, because not every dog kind of like, they don't have that big smile, for you to see. So you not only need to figure it out if they're smiling or not, of what's going on with them. Now, so how do you measure the success of your consultant services, and what kind of result have you seen with your clients?
Well, I'm just rolling out the leadership development training program. So we have there are, I think, 3-4 different evaluations that I can do. couple of posts, couple of pre to kind of see the baseline where everybody is, and then immediately following to kind of see how the training had a result. And one of my favorites, actually, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, is called a Kolbe assessment, Kolbe. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love the Kolbe assessment. It's not a personality test, it's not an IQ test, but it tells how you work. And me personally, my biggest thing that I do is research. So like, I don't know if you know what the numbers mean, and I can't remember everything, but my research number is huge compared to everything else. So I research everything to death before I will even take a step, which sometimes, and maybe, you maybe people like this, maybe like this yourself, you kind of get paralysis by analysis. Have you heard of that? Where you spend so much time researching and learning, and I've got to read one more book before I try this. I've got to take one more course before I try this. So, but if you do the Kolbe assessment, which is one of the things that I like to incorporate into both the individual 6-month training program and the corporate programs, is to sort of see how people work, because I think that's very important with businesses, because I think a lot of people, they don't just quit their bosses. They may like their boss, but if they don't like their job because it's not playing to their strengths, then I think that's something that, doing the Kolbe assessment can also help, is to find out what a person's strengths are within their job and maybe focus doing on that some more as well.
Yes. And also that when you talk about individuals, do you bring like a group of individuals together, or is it like one-on-one with each one of them for a certain amount of time?
My favorite answer is it depends. It just depends. It depends on what the individual needs. It depends on what a manager and their employee might feel that person needs. And sometimes it's a team effort, because sometimes you do need to get together as a group and work as a team. But again, it just kind of comes down, like I said, it's all bespoke. It's all, tailored with the person, with the company, with the manager, with the business, to sort of get the best result. Because it's, if you're just doing an off the shelf, I could come in and say, I'm going to do a workshop on this. And I talk about things that maybe they're like, yeah, that's interesting, but doesn't do us any good. So that's not something I like to do. I'd much prefer to find out, kind of go in depth as to what they actually think they need, they want that's going to do them the most good, and see if I can't tailor what I do, what I talk about, what I train on, and how I train them on it to their specifications, rather than just handing them and go, here, take it or leave it. I don't
yes,
like that.
Exactly. Yeah, because everyone learn differently. Some people you can give it to them and they got it, but some people you give it to them, they're like, I have no clue what's going on with this, and they just put it in the table and never touch it again in their life because it's headache for them. Yeah. So when you take the approach the way you said, I think it's the best way you understand, or the best way for individuals wise to to help them, to guide them, to lead them to be the best version of themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So now you mentioned you love your German Shepherds, and I'm sorry for your loss, for losing them, because I know they mean a lot to you. Yeah. So can you tell us a bit more about how this passion has influenced your life and your work?
Oh, well, if it weren't for my 2 German Shepherds, I wouldn't be anything or anybody or anywhere, honestly. They influenced my life so much. They were both rescues. They were both purebred German Shepherds, and I rescued each of them when they were about a year old, 2 years apart. So I got my boy, he was maybe 9 months. He was about 9 months to a year old. I pulled him out of a shelter, and he was actually being threatened with being put down because the shelter thought he was a fear biter, because he was very, very shy, very, very scared. And I had kind of been working with him in the shelter. I was a shelter volunteer, and I actually saw him on the first day that I volunteered. And I was in love. I fell in love with him. The minute I saw him, I was in love, head over heels. And so I kind of was working with him to bring him out of his shell. And I was like the only one he trusted, until my mom showed up one day when I was flying, because I was still a pilot then. And so I was on a trip, and mom went in to work with him, and he trusted her as well. But we got a call the day I was supposed to pick him up from the shelter to bring him home as a foster. They said, oh, no, we're putting him down today because he barked. Literally, he barked at one of the workers. And we're going, whoa. No,
what?
Hang on. Yeah. He had barked at a worker who'd gone back to the back. She never went back to the back, this particular person. And he barked at her. He was a German Shepherd, good sized Shepherd, right? And he went, Row. And they went, sorry, that's my German Shepherd impression. And And they said, nope, he's dangerous. And we went, no, he's not. So I go
Wow.
running into my dad's room because he was asleep at the time. I said, Dad, they're going to kill him. And so Dad comes leaping and he's like, we'll just see about that. And the three of us, my mom, my dad, and I go down to the shelter, and we just asked if we could kind of say goodbye to him, to Jerry, my dog. And the shelter said, yeah, okay, sure. And so we were sitting outside of the shelter, the three of us, well, the four of us, because Jerry was there, just kind of being, he was so quiet. He was so happy. He was so peaceful. And the shelter director had been at lunch, and he came back from lunch, and he saw the four of us there with Jerry just being as sweet and as calm and as nice as you please. And he made me a deal. He said, look, you take this dog to go to an animal behaviorist. Now, that's somebody who has a PhD in animal behavior. They're a doctor, a proper doctor. And you get him evaluated. And if she says, or he says that he's dangerous, you bring him back here. And I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll bring him right back. Going,
yeah, right.
Not happening. When I get him out, I don't care what she says. He's mine. So I did take him to an animal behaviorist because I said I would. And she was just like, yeah, he's just afraid. Here's what you do. You do this, that. And she gave me a whole long list of behavioral things to do, training and, calm. And they're actually where I got the calm, confident idea. My dogs, confident leadership from my dogs, because if you are working, especially with dogs like German Shepherds who are big and smart and very active, you have to have that calm, confident energy in order for them to listen to you, to follow you, to do what you want. So I developed my system based on the fact that not only do you have to be calm and confident as a pilot, because, you don't want to be losing your mind and freaking out when bells start dinging and lights start flashing. But in order to train dogs well, you also have that very calm, very confident, very relaxed energy. So I actually learned that from my dogs concurrently with doing it as a pilot. And Jerry not only was not a fear biter, he became fearless. He was so brave and so courageous. And he and I became a therapy dog team. So I would actually take him to nursing homes, and he would help the residents. He'd let them pet him or whatever. And he actually helped some of the residents with their physical therapy because he was obsessed with tennis balls. He loved tennis balls, loved them, would do anything for a tennis ball. And on a couple of occasions, the physical therapist would be like, I've got this patient, the person in the nursing home who will not do their physical therapy. Can you help? And he's like, yeah, sure. So the patients would throw or kick the ball for Jerry, who would then retrieve it. He would give it to me. I'd hand it back to the patient. So they would get their physical therapy done because they would do it for him where they wouldn't do it for the human therapist. So I love that.
Oh, so they actually help a lot. And then that's the dog that we as humans almost put to sleep for nothing, just because we didn't want to take the time to get to know him.
Perfect. Yeah, that's
as
exactly
a living
right.
being.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Wow.
So, if it weren't for Holly and Jerry, and Holly was my other, she was a rescue as well. I pulled her out of the shelter when she was about a year old, a couple of years after Jerry. And she was at the opposite end of the personality spectrum. So where Jerry was quiet and relaxed and chill, Holly was big and bold and in your face and bouncy. And so I had to learn as a trainer, to sort of train him and train her and sort of bring her a little bit down and bring him a little bit up, if that makes sense as far as their kind of personalities and attitudes go. So I got a lot of experience that I can translate to working with humans from working with my dogs, because some people, they're quiet and they're shy and they're maybe a little timid or a little nervous, and you've got to bring them up. And then some people, you're just like, dude, you got to chill, right? And you've got to learn how to sort of bring them down. So I got a lot of experience, not only with the flying, dealing with the stressful situations and the potentially dangerous situations and all that, being the last word of making decisions after taking in all of the information, because the captain, you might have to explain your decisions to the chief pilot when you get down, but in the end, you're the one making that final decision, whatever that is. So not only did I take that to the leadership development and leadership training, but working with my dogs, and they're completely disparate personalities or completely different personalities. They also help you working with humans as well.
Yes, because also as humans, we all have completely different personality. Yeah. Like the way we think, the way we walk, the way we smile, everything about us is different. So it's kind of really even when you look at any living being, we're all just similar to one another. So it's easy really to pass it on to the next one. And also that I think that even with working with dogs, especially dogs, that was like one of them, they wanted to put that dog down because they scared that that dog will bite someone. For you to be able to manage to calm him down to like, hey, it's okay. I got you. No one gonna hurt you. And one thing I realized too, even with animals, sometimes we think the animal's scared of actually want to hurt us. But in reality, that's because they are scared of us. That's the reason why they're trying to protect themselves, because all they can do is bark or bite you. So whatever they need to do, they're going to go for it. And I think sometimes we need to think about that as well. It's not just about us. Think about just like you would think about the other person in front of you, think of the animals in front of you. What's in that animal mind?
Exactly. Yeah. And that was one of the things that I wanted to sort of get across in that workshop that I did, where I did show pictures of the dogs in different emotional states. These are my dogs, and I knew what they were saying. So I could say with authority if the people who were kind of guessing as to what the dogs were thinking was right. But that's exactly what I wanted to get across and what you just said is exactly right. Dogs, they can only bark or growl or bite. That's like run away. Obviously, they could run away. But, unlike humans who have a range of ways we can express whether we like something or we don't like something, or we're afraid or we're not happy or whatever, animals, as you said, don't have that. But if you can learn to read how animals are thinking or what they're thinking, you can translate that a lot. This is just from my experience into what humans are doing, because believe it or not, a lot of times the body language and the expressions are really similar.
Yes, they are. They are actually. I remember when I was a kid, I saw a snake. I run like a chicken so fast. But my grandpa stopped me and said, actually, the snake is more scared of you because she's gone too. Like, he was far gone before I was gone. So it was kind of like, oh, I didn't realize that. I thought he was going to bite me, but he wasn't going to bite me. He was trying to run away. He was scared, as I was scared. So I learned that as a kid, that just because an animal, the way they act, and I'm not saying don't run, but they are afraid too, because they're trying to live just like you are trying to live your life.
Yep, exactly. You summed it up beautifully.
So in your opinion, what are some of the most important qualities for a successful leader?
Empathy is a big one. You have to be able to sort of put yourself in your people's place. You just said it. You said it a second ago. Imagine what the animal is feeling, right? Put yourself in the animal's place. Well, you have to do the same thing as a leader with the people that you're working with. Put yourself in their place. What they're bringing to the workplace may just be on the very surface of what they're actually going through. And I'm not saying, they don't have to come to work and be professional and do the job. I absolutely do believe that. But you have to understand as a leader that maybe they're carrying a lot of baggage. Maybe things aren't going well at home. Maybe they've got a family member that's sick or whatever. So while, yes, it is their responsibility to come to work and be professional and do the job they were hired to do, it's your job as a leader to also understand that maybe they're going to need a little more support or a little more help or a little more understanding from you so that they can bring their best self to the workplace despite what they're dealing with at home. So I think empathy is a big one. Compassion is another big one.
Sure.
And also communication skills are huge. One of the things that, and I don't want to bust on younger generations, I'm sorry, I don't, but a lot of times everybody's just, they're doing this.
Yes.
And they're short text messaging. And so the skill of communicating in writing and in verbal communication skills is kind of fallen by the wayside. And I'm not even making that up. I actually did a survey, this is about 8 months ago. I went to a hiring fair at my university, my alma mater, and I was talking to the people, the human resources, or in fact, sometimes it was the CEOs of the companies who were there looking to hire the students. And I said, okay, well, and I did kind of a survey of them. I said, what are some of the things that you're seeing in new hire candidates that they need to work on? And across the board, it was writing skills and communication skills. Every one of them said that these are things that kind of the people coming up, and whether it's a product of the social media or the text messaging or whatever, I'm not the expert to say, but across the board, the human resources people and the managers and the CEOs that I was talking to said communication skills, writing and speaking are two of the big things that people really need to work on these days. So I think as a leader, that's important to you. And if you are kind of lacking in those skills, or maybe you think maybe you're not as good as you should be, get some help with it. Help is out there.
Yes. And also, I like the point that you brought up. It's not just saying youngs are bad, but it's the generation that we are in right now, and also the technology that we have. As a child, I didn't have a cell phone. I remember my mom had a cell phone that was huge. It was like when she's holding it, like, whoa, my. So compared to now, what we have is small, and then kids now they have a cell phone. So, like for example, my one of my cousins texted me, said MIM, and I'm sitting here like MIM. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. What is it? What is it?
And until today, I don't know. Until today, I never ask. I do not know what it is, because a lot of time when you don't know what it is and you ask them, they're like, you're not staying current to the real world right now. It's like, I'm trying to, but I don't know. You guys come up with something new every single day. So it's just kind of like these things, like the way they text, they try to make it short. I understand, to not saying long text messages, but we are, like you said, we are losing our communication skills, our writing skills, and it's going away. And I think that if we don't, as parents, if we don't try to stop that in the early age, it's going to get worse and worse. And then what's going to happen to the business world? Because eventually that's where they are going to go for a job.
Exactly. So, yeah. And despite the fact that I know, and I am not an expert on artificial intelligence, and I know it's the big thing now, right? Chat GPT. I'll be honest with you, I haven't even looked at it. I haven't even checked it out. Because I have a problem, and this is just me personally, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not going to make a judgment on the virtues or vices of artificial intelligence here in this forum. But I think that if you start to rely too much on automation, on technology, you lose the ability to think for yourself. You lose the things that make you human.
Yes.
I don't actually use, GPS in your car, the sat nav in your car. I actually don't use GPS in my car when I drive because I like to have the ability to picture where I am in space. So I get on Google Maps and I memorize the route. And if I need to, I write it down, and I use Street View so I know what I'm looking for. And then I just drive it. And I don't use GPS because I want to maintain that ability of spatial orientation, of being able to picture where I am and imagine where I am. And if I have sort of an overall view of where I'm trying to go, as say something comes up in the road, I don't have to rely on that little pink line going, turn left here. I'm like, oh, I need to turn left here, and then I can get over here and I can go that way. So I actually don't use sat nav in my car because I like to maintain that spatial ability. And for the same reason, I don't plan on, for me personally, using AI, despite the fact that I know it could probably help, because I don't want to lose my ability to think and to research and to write for myself and to come up with creative, intelligent ideas, right? And to be able to express them. I don't want to lose that ability.
Yes.
And I'm kind of concerned that might happen.
Gina, it will happen. It's going to happen because now something else is thinking for us. We're not thinking anymore. And we're supposed to. We were born. We were made to do that. We have the ability to think, to create great things. Look at the world, the way it turns. It's because we are able to think. Like the books you see come out, like they turn to movies, you get to watch them. It's like, whoa, this is amazing. Like we are doing amazing things. But like you said, if we stop thinking for ourselves, if we stop writing for ourselves, we stop, like you said, even with the GPS, you're right about that. Because there's some people that probably go to the same place 20 times, but doesn't remember how to get there by themselves. Because they use a GPS every single day.
Exactly. Yep.
So
right. I don't want to lose those abilities.
No, me either. Because that's what's making me humans. So if I lose that, then I'm just a bot. Really, that's how I see it.
Have you ever heard of the song? It's from, I want to say the late 60s, could be early 70s. It's called In the Year 2525 by Zager and Evans, I want to say. Look it up. In the Year 2525. And they actually, back in the late 60s, I think is when it was, they actually sang about this exact thing. And they talk about in the year 2020, 2525, basically humans aren't going to be necessary because we've had robots to do everything, and they kind of take it through the years, and eventually humans are just not even needed. And look that song up. It's pretty prescient.
Yes.
So I don't want to make the leap to that yet. I'm not ready to be a robot.
No, not until my brain stops working, at least.
Yeah, exactly.
So now, how can someone get your services?
There are any number of ways to get in touch with me. Probably one of the best is you can email me directly at ginamlongo.com. You can check out my website, ginamlongo.com. Pretty straightforward. And if you actually, can I mention Britain Unleashed? If you actually want to get a little bit inspired to maybe travel on your own and learn more about the UK and more about me and my dogs, this is kind of a separate thing. This is like my passion project. BritainUnleashed.com. And that talks kind of about what my dogs and I did for that time we were on the road. It's a lot of British history and stuff like that. But for the corporate trainings or for, if you want to do more of an individual 6-month program, email me or go onto my website and I would love to hear from you.
And they can also follow you on social media, I will think.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. LinkedIn. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Sorry. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with other professionals on LinkedIn.
Yeah, actually, it's fun. So what advice would you give to someone who is just starting out as a leader or entrepreneur?
So you mean I want to make sure I answer the right question. So they're just starting out as a leader. They've just been put into a leadership position. Is that what you're asking? What advice would I give?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Focus on your communication skills and remember, and this I think is something that people do tend to forget, you're in a leadership position now, but don't forget what it was like to not be in one. Don't lose that connection that you have to who you used to be and be able to put yourself in the position of the people you're now leading because you were just one of them, possibly. So remember, don't forget what that's like to be what they are. Because if you're able to maintain that connection between, yes, you're a leader now, yes, you're in a leader, position of authority now, but remember what it was like to not be, and that way you'll be able to empathize with them. And so when you're giving them feedback, if you're having one-on-one conversations or you're communicating with them, you'll remember what it was like to be on the receiving end of that. And maybe you'll be able to do it a little bit better or to do it very well.
Remember where you come from.
Exactly. Remember where you came from. Way to sum it up. Oh, you said it better than I did.
Yes. Thank you so much, Gina. Anything else you'd like to share with us before I let you go today?
Yeah, pay attention to dog behavior because you can apply it to human behavior as well.
Psychologically, you can. It's similar to one another. And I appreciate you so much, Gina, for your knowledge, for sharing what you have been doing for the past few years, and also just learning about how you love your dogs and how they inspire you, because I've seen people that treat animals very badly, and I think that it's wrong. And I love meeting other people that just love that, and because that passion also can pass on to humans as well, the way we treat humans as well. So it starts from somewhere to get somewhere. And in the leadership skills, God knows our youngs need it. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So I appreciate it so much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I had such a good time speaking with you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me talk about my dogs a little bit, because as you can see, I light up when I get to do that.
Yes, you do. And I love it.